in for the visit, and she tells me this story about praying for the number 5, and this is like my 4th month that I was like facing like suicidal, I'm depressed, and I say to her, Mom, you got to pick a number that's a little more realistic. A 5 is not going to happen. And she said to me, son, I believe in God, I believe in miracles, and I want you to start believing in them too. And I knew I was putting her through a lot of pain. And I said, all right, Mom, I will. And from that day forward, I started praying on the number 5. I started asking God for a 5-year sentence. I started meditating. I read all these books on meditation. And I started putting a 5 into my meditation. I read books on using a mantra to quiet your mind. And I would put a 5 into the mantra I repeated all day long in my mind. I'm repeating this mantra. So now fast forward to accepting this plea deal. And my lawyer prepared me that when we eventually go for sentencing, he's like, no judge, especially on a murder case, is going to want to be on the low end. They're gonna want to be on the high end of the scale. So just prepare yourself. And I'm like, all right. I finally go for sentencing. And in court, on the record, the judge gives me a 5 and apologizes for having to send me to prison for a single day. He says, I know that you only did what you did because of what was done to you. And when I got taken out of that court and put back in the holding cell, it just dawned on me that I got the 5 that I'd been praying on, that I scoffed at my mother for. And I couldn't believe that the impossible became possible. I went to prison at Northern State Prison in Newark, New Jersey. In my first day there, a therapist came to my cell and said, I followed your case on the news, and I just saw your name come across the computer. I can't believe you're here. She goes, will you start therapy? And I said, absolutely. I had to finally surrender. I resisted change my whole life. I thought I was a big, bad, tough guy. I'll just do things my way. And my way didn't work, obviously. And I finally decided to surrender and to let anything and everything come into my life that could take my life in a new direction. I had no desire to go back to the animal life. So here I have to go to prison to get therapy for the first time in my life. And my second one-on-one therapy with her, she said, I run a group therapy class in prison for childhood trauma. Would you join that? And I said, sure. And I'm in there with Latin King gang members, Blood gang members, Muslims, Christians, and we all had these fucked up childhoods. And we're all sharing our story in front of each other. And we're crying in front of each other. And we're hugging each other. And that group therapy class was the greatest healer I could have ever got in. So as shitty as prison is, at least I got that group therapy class under my belt. My therapist also came to me one day and she said, I can't believe it, Clark. For the first time in a New Jersey prison, they're gonna offer a meditation class. It's a 15-week Vipassana meditation class. She goes, there's limited seats. I want you to sign up and maybe you'll get in. So I signed up for it. And I was one of 15 people to get in. 2.5 hours on a Friday night while you got all this insanity swirling around. I'd be in a classroom getting to do meditation quietly and quietly. I got released from prison on December 30th of 2016, basically the first year of 2017. And I had led this selfish, indulgent lifestyle, and I still had a little bit of selfish in me. And when I say that because I decided I wanted to file a lawsuit against the Boy Scouts. And I went and saw a law firm. They read me the law, New Jersey law, and the guy said, as the law states, you have no recourse for a lawsuit. And he goes, there's advocates who have been working for 15 years to get a new law, and they haven't gotten anywhere yet. Maybe you can join them, and your story's so over the top that you can sway some senators and Congress people to pass a new law. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, I got the numbers of the advocates. I'll set up a meeting here in my office. I'm like, cool. So I went in for selfish reasons, just for myself. And I walked out of there becoming an advocate for everyone in the state who had been abused.
I've got movement.
I started meeting with senators, lawyers for the Catholic Church.
It's heading for the substation.
I got to testify before the House Judicial Committee. And 2 years after becoming an advocate and people telling us you will never get a new law passed in New Jersey, we went from the worst law in the country to the strongest law. 2 years of being an advocate. I was in Trenton, New Jersey to see the final vote, and it was voted in unanimously. When I was locked up in prison, I heard that internal voice for the second time as I sat in my cell quietly, loud and clear, saying to me, you're going to become a motivational speaker. And I had been afraid, deathly afraid of getting up in front of people and speaking. In college, I'm doing shots of vodka at 8 o'clock in the morning before I got to go do reports in front of the class. And I think it was because I had all this shit, all this garbage inside of me that I'm carrying around. Like, how can I stand up in front of people? They're gonna see all this crap. They're gonna see that I'm a fraud. And yet, I heard that voice say, you're gonna be a motivational speaker. And I threw up my hands. I'm like, whatever. And I thought to myself, how's a dude coming out of prison for murder ever gonna get a motivational speaking career going? Less than 2 months out of prison, before I became an advocate, one of the pastors who used to come into the jail and teach Bible study said, you gotta come to my church. He wrote me when I was in prison. He's like, you gotta come see my church. It's a huge church. And when I went to see him, he's like, we're doing a water baptism. And he goes, we're baptizing people in tubs that were made by New Jersey prisoners. He goes, how ironic would that be for you to get baptized in a tub made by your fellow prisoners? And I'm like, that'd be pretty cool. Let's do it. And I had to read this testimony in front of like a congregation of like 500 about why I was getting baptized. And in the audience was this lady from a place called Ginny's House. Ginny's House is for abused children. She heard my testimony and she reached out to me. And she said, April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I'm presenting at Centenary College. Would you like to be my guest speaker? And I was like, absolutely. So here, less than 4 months out of prison, where I had no idea I'd ever become a motivational speaker, this door is getting opened by God. And from the time the law got passed in New Jersey, I concentrated more on speaking. I spoke in rehab center after rehab center after rehab center. I spoke at churches. I went back to the jail where I had been held for murder for 3.5 years and got to speak to the inmates there. A director of a play, off-Broadway play, called Blackbird, based on molestation, reached out to me and asked if I'd be guest speaker after the play on stage. And I'm like, absolutely. Twice I went and spoke on stage after the play ended. NBC did a documentary on me. The producers of NBC did a documentary on my case. And I got on the Tamron Hall daytime talk show. And from being on that talk show, I got offered a speaking contract by a firm out of LA who wanted to represent me as a speaker. So that little voice I heard in that prison cell saying you're going to be a motivational speaker, and again I scoffed at it, sort of just threw my hands up. Here, a few years down the road, I just get offered a contract by a speaker.
Evacuate immediately. Doctor, the specimens are
And I share this stuff to try to give people hope. That's the one thing that always kept me going. People are like, how have you survived all the shit you've survived? And I'm like, I always held on to that little glimmer of hope. I went through life without any purpose, without any meaning. All I was trying to do was just stay one step ahead of my pain. And now, helping other victims open up, helping them speak out, letting them know they're not alone. I always felt alone in the world, like nobody else could understand the pain I was carrying inside. Well, there's a hell of a lot of people who understand the pain I'm carrying inside. And I always held on to hope, and that always kept me going. If you can just retain a little bit of hope, it can keep you motivated. And I stayed motivated. When I was locked up, I wrote a manuscript of the first half of my life, and I dreamed of like getting a book deal. And I wrote 3 book proposals and got nowhere with them. And out of the blue, Simon & Schuster read my last book proposal and just offered me a contract, which I just signed a few weeks ago for a book deal. I just finished up a multi-episode documentary. A producer reached out to me and said, your story's amazing, it's inspiring. I want to give your voice to other people to help them open up. And we just finished up this multi-episode documentary film. And that college sweetheart who I lost 30 years ago, who I hated myself that I couldn't commit to her, I couldn't take the next step with her. After 30 years, I finally reached out to her to apologize, to tell her why I couldn't commit to her. She used to say to me, we'd be lying in bed together, and I would just stare off into the distance. And she would be like this, and there would be nothing. And she'd be like, hey. I'm like, what? She goes, where'd you just go? I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, you just left me. She's like, where'd you disappear in your mind to? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So she always knew there was something troubling me, but didn't know what it was. And I had reached out to her and explained my story, explained how I finally had meaning and purpose to help others now. 10 years sober. And we got together for coffee 2 weeks after I reached out to her, and we fell madly back in love. So I just want people to realize that, I mean, I sunk to where I was suicidal. I was held in a suicide cell for 4 weeks. I was put into jail for murder, for murdering a lieutenant who worked in that very jail. It doesn't get much worse than that. And yet, a few years down the road, by holding on to hope and by taking chances and not caring if I failed and throwing as much mud against the wall as I possibly could, one thing after another started coming through in my life. Just the opportunity to reach people on a large scale and get them to open up. When people hear my story, they relate to it. You relate to people that have been through the same fire as you. And breaking your silence is the first step to healing. And I don't mind throwing all my garbage out to the world if it'll help the next person break their silence. I learned this line in therapy. It's from the AA Blue Book, but it's so true. It says, We are only as sick as our secrets. I had secrets up to my chin. And I was sick. I was sick inside. So speak out, break your silence. Don't hold secrets in unless you can do it.
Hey, hey!
We're gonna make your morning easy, Betty. We're gonna set you guys up this morning.
Yep.
Oh, thank you, Ray.
I don't know. Hey, hey!
That's the most I've ever heard Lorraine speak. That's the most I've ever heard Lorraine speak.
Seal the gates. Protect the Empress.
Your heart? This is Elle, my assistant.
It's in the vents.
No.
We'll have help.
Nothing. You got any milk?
Milk? Or cream?
Any bottle.
That's okay.
I got buttermilk. I can't keep milk away.
What's that?
I can't keep milk away.
Ray drinks all the milk?
Right, let's go to milk. Down, Mike.